What was your biggest that's how that works moment? I bought a car and was worried for months that my oil level never lowered. After 6 months I called my friend who sold me the car to ask about this. He explained that's how it's supposed to work. Then when I realized every single car I owned and my dad owned my whole life leaked oil. More likely burning oil than leaking. I feel like you'd notice the oil puddles everywhere you parked if you were leaking that much oil. When my brother and I were really little we had an old family friend who would pick us up by the ears. He would grab each ear but then would also have us grab onto his forearms. It took me until I was much older to realize that he wasn't actually picking us up by our ears, but instead used his forearms to lift us up. Still a great trick to use with little kids. My brother did this to my then 4-year-old son. Nobody explained it to him. My son tried picking up a pre-K classmate by his ears. It did not go well. I bought some of those expensive windshield wipers that repel water and they sucked. It would smear the rain and the dang blade kept sliding off. I'd have to get off to put it back on. This went on for 4-5 months. One day I went to slide the blade back on that I realized it wasn't the blade, but the blade cover that I kept putting back. For a while, my Christmas lights would randomly turn off. I couldn't figure out what it was. Was it the wireless switch? Was it some fault in the electricity? It would seemingly be random, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Then one day I was coming home from work and my neighbors got home at the same time. As they were locking their car doors, my lights turned off. I realized, that's how that works. I have an air fryer. It's a pretty handy kitchen tool. The food goes in a basket which is attached to what's basically a metal bowl, so the grease and crumbs and whatever fall out of the basket and into the bowl. My only real complaint was it was hard to get the food out without a mess. You try and dump the basket onto a plate and the oil in the bowl still kind of runs out in a puddle. You can keep it away from the food if you're paying attention and wipe it up, but it's an annoyance. Then one day I mentioned it to my wife while making some fries. She just looked at me and said, "Why don't you take them apart?" and took the handle and pressed the button to separate the basket and bowl. Dumped the fries out mess free and reconnects it back to the bowl. Now you might be thinking I'm an idiot for not knowing about that button. It's actually worse. I knew that button was there. I just used it to separate the pieces for cleaning and it somehow never occurred to me to take them apart during use, despite the fact it's just one simple button that can be used with one hand. This is such a FASAP moment. Air fryers are the best though. Got a laptop for a job managing a cafe. Worked fine, but it was inconvenient to use behind the counter and in the kitchen. After watching me struggle to use it standing up, the owner took it from me, rotated the screen and flipped it closed. It was a combo laptop tablet and I had no idea. How long have you had this thing? 2 months. I just realized, this past spring at a party, that I've been using corkscrews on wine bottles all wrong. Turns out it is not correct form to screw it in by turning the bottle, then depressing the handles. I was publicly mocked. I deserved it. I'm 29. Bartender here. I didn't realize I was using a wine key waiter's friend wrong until I saw someone else doing it. I would just screw the corkscrew in, then just yank the cork out by pulling on the horizontally positioned handle. When I saw someone use the lever action properly, I was like, that's why it was so difficult. My aha moment was learning why the little metal bits on the end of tape measures are always loose and jiggly. It's so that it can slide to compensate for the thickness of the metal stop depending which side of the edge you measure on. Genius bit of engineering that most people don't even realize is helping them out all the time. Never knew why some yellow lights seemed to change so fast and others felt like they took forever. I thought it was just a flat amount of time for everywhere. Then Reddit told me that yellow lights stayed yellow for the speed limit divided by 10 in seconds. So 25 miles per hour speed limit means the light will stay yellow for 2.5 seconds. And 45 miles per hour means it will stay yellow for 4.5 seconds. It all makes sense now. I discovered, by accident, that when I push the car door unlock button 3 times, it makes all the windows go down. It's a very handy feature in warm weather. Just 2 days ago, I learned that the wax in candles is used as a fuel and not as a melting thing to slow down the burning of the wick. Should I mention that I have a chemistry degree? turn signals. I couldn't understand how the car seemed to know where my dad was going to be turning, so I started to watch closely when we were getting in the car to see when he told the car where we were going so the car would know what turns to signal. I was freaking amazed that it was this tiny little gesture he was making before every turn. I used to think this too. I asked my dad when I was younger how the car knew where he was going to turn and he told me magic, which didn't help at all. When we were like 28, I had a friend that would drive her outgoing mail to the post office every time she had to mail a bill. She had been doing this forever. One day I asked her why she doesn't mail them from her house. She looked puzzled and said, "Because if I put them in the mailbox, the mailman isn't going to just take them." I was like, why not? She proceeded to tell me mailboxes didn't work that way. I told her they do if you put the flag up. She was floored. I asked, what did you spend the last 28 years thinking the flag was for? She said decoration. When I was little, my brother and I didn't like the person across the street, so we'd go over and put the flag on her mailbox up. I didn't know what it was for and I don't think my bro did either, but every time we saw it down we'd put it back up. And now I'm wondering if we made the mailman mad at her too. I grew up in a time and place without any real sex education. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I thought it was a myth that women had multiple holes to pee with and have sex with. First time I had a tampon in while peeing, I thought exact the phrase in this question. When I learned the snap sound from snapping your finger comes from the finger hitting your palm fast, not from the finger snapping from your thumb. This also helps tremendously for when you teach people how to snap. LOL, and now I know too. Just tried it and they are instantly louder when I focus more on the finger hitting my palm. Open road tolling happens because a car breaks a magnetic field and at that very time a camera takes a picture. I have met the guy knighted for making this happen at highway speeds. My now wife, then girlfriend, sometimes gets into a really foul mood, and I always thought I was doing something to pee her off. One day, her uncle was visiting when she got like this. He calmly told her to go get a snack. Turns out my wife gets really hangry, and has done so ever since she was a little girl. Everything suddenly made sense. This knowledge must have made your life easier than it could have been. The alphabetize icon in Excel. I had a professor in college demonstrate this feature in a huge lecture hall while going over APA citations for a paper. Half the class went oh and had their minds blown. For the longest time, I thought that when people talked about sticking their heads in the oven to kill themselves, that they just set it to broil and persevered through the pain. I only had electric ovens growing up. When I found out the truth, I had a good laugh at myself. There was a Garfield comic strip where he wanted to kill himself, stuck his head into the oven and nothing happened. In the last panel, he said something like stupid electric oven. I never understood that one until a few months ago. Orbital mechanics. Thanks KSP. You can't just fly up to go to space. You need to go sideways real fast if you want to get in orbit. Ruined so many space movies for me. If you want to go to space, go up. If you want to stay in space, go sideways, really fast. When I first joined Reddit, I was confused by the amount of stupid questions on our no stupid questions. It took me a while to figure out that it was saying that no question is a stupid question, and not that stupid questions aren't allowed on the sub. I used to struggle to get the little cap off a new stick of deodorant. My wife walked into the bathroom as I was using my teeth to get it off one day. She took it from me and just spun the thing to raise the deodorant, which also pushed the cap off. She then turned around and walked out without saying a word, and that's how I know she loves me. But I kill spiders, so we're even. That reminds me of the time my husband dropped a spoon so it fell through the rack of the dishwasher and landed on the bottom. I watched him flail around for a minute or two, contorting his body and trying to squeeze his hand through the bars, before I finally went over, pulled the rack out, and just grabbed the spoon. I was recently schooled that when I turn the burners down to 3 on my stove, it doesn't reduce the power to 0.3 of the total power, but rather cycles through full power, but just 30% of the time. My drunk mind was blown. I'm sitting over here trying to make sense of how this is true, then realized you're talking about an electric stove and not a gas one. I got an Allen key with a piece of furniture to help put it together. I had never seen one before. I put the long end in the screw and was twisting the heck out of the short end. I figured it was like a screwdriver and you would make tiny twists. I was 3/4 done and my fingers were dead when I asked myself would it be easier to twist the long end. Spoiler, it is way easier to use the long end. Lasers. I think my prof thought she was going to have to pick me up off the ground when I found out it's an acronym for the way they work. Light amplification through a stimulated emission of radiation. I questioned literally everything in life that day. When I was growing up reading popular science, they always used to capitalize laser to show that it was an acronym, but then I started reading sci-fi where it's used as a regular noun and totally forgot. In a similar vein, radar stands are radio detection and ranging. A lot more specific than other comments, but I'll still share. I was a computer science student that was freaking terrible at math. I tested into algebra when I got to college and spent a couple of years slowly working my way up the math ladder to pre-calculus. Meanwhile, I had taken several computer science courses and gotten decent at programming. I still sucked at math and had trouble understanding it, until one day in pre-calc when we were learning about matrices. The professor said matrices are used in lots of other fields, notably computer science, where they are known as two-dimensional arrays. My mind immediately exploded. I had no idea how matrices worked but had done stuff using two-dimensional arrays, and in an instant all sorts of math started to click into place for me because I realized it had a programming equivalent. Ever since, math has made way more sense to me and clicked into place much easier for some reason. One of the great things about CS and math degrees that people never seem to talk about is that whole transformability of ideas. You learn that a lot of things are basically the same as other things, and this frees you to deal with the core concept without getting caught up on details. It's a real the enemy's gate is down kind of thing. I first got a McFlurry and I tried to drink through the spoon, and then it hit me. I had to take it out and scoop with the spoon. They look like that because they mount the spoons to the mixer and use them to mix the McFlurry. That fractions are just division. I always struggled with fractions as a kid because the teachers would always give these extremely overcomplicated explanations of how they worked. Then one day I was trying to write 1/4 when I was programming and realized that 1 divided by 4 equals 1/4. I was working as a programmer by this time. My wife bought a used Saturn. It wasn't the Econobox model, but I don't remember the name. Anyway, it was the highest trim level. She had a bunch of electrical problems the selling dealer took care of, but a year later, after Saturn was killed off, she needed recall work done. She went to drop off the car and forgot some paperwork in the car, so went out to get it. It was running. She had the keys in her hand and there were no keys in the ignition. Turns out she had remote start on it and didn't know it. The dealer sold her the correct remote and another set of keys. They programmed the remote but not the new keys. Told her to read the owner's manual to program them so she didn't get charged. That car had all kinds of high-end tech stuff you didn't see outside of luxury vehicles of the time, like 2 remotes for garage door openers built into the dome light area. We constantly found new things that were way ahead of their time on that car, but her favorite had to be the surprise remote start. I'm so sad Saturn is dead. I never got to own one. My boyfriend just learned garbage disposals have a reset button after spending the better part of the evening dismantling our kitchen plumbing. I just assumed when he said it was broken that he already knew that since he's pretty handy. I laughed a lot. Garbage disposals often also have a keyed thing on the bottom to manually spin the mechanism. This can be super handy for if it's jammed and you wanna wriggle it without firing up the motor. When I first moved into this condo, there was a microwave above the oven. For a long time, I couldn't figure out why the heck I couldn't turn on the light bulb above the stove. It was probably a good 6 weeks before I looked at the microwave and saw the light bulb button and pressed it. The irony in this comment is real. It was a real light bulb moment. In the song I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus, mommy isn't kissing a stranger dressed as Santa. It's the dad. I was putting the lights on the tree this year with my wife and son when it hit me. I paused, reflected, and then kept stringing the lights like I'd known this fact my whole life. Weird that even as kids, so many of us think that she is being unfaithful. When I was 16 I had one of those vibrating razor things. The parents weren't home so I figured I'd see what all the fuss was about with vibrators. I lost my virginity at 15 but never experienced an orgasm. I didn't even know what masturbation was. I popped the head off the razor and put the vibrating part in me. Didn't feel anything. A bit bummed and confused I pulled it out, and doing so, it brushed up against my clit, and after that moment I didn't leave my room much for a while. Long division. When I was a kid, I struggled so hard to get it. After months one day it just clicked. Been a long dividing fool since then. Algebra. Now that's a different story. I'd say it was when I discovered how actually sex reproduction worked. When I was around 9 I think I knew more or less that genitals were involved, but I always read about the process in vague terms like when the sperm reaches the egg. But I still hadn't fully grasped how the sperm got to meet the egg. One day I was reading another book and I finally read that the penis is inserted in the vagina, and that was a light bulb moment for me when everything became clear. I'm female, and my parents are super old school. Therefore, not much sex ed for me growing up. I was 12 when I learned that erections were a thing. Until that point, I had no idea how the guy got his dangly bits into the giral hole. I mean, his bits dangle, and the hole goes up. Makes no sense. Not sure if this counts, but I put all my pans in the nifty storage drawer of my oven. My oven doesn't have a storage drawer. It was a broiler. My broiler turns on automatically, or it did at the time. I have a gas stove. I opened the drawer to get a pan and screamed as flames suddenly appeared. Singed my hand right good too. Friggin' devil drawers. To be fair, some ovens have the broiler on top inside the oven and there is a nifty little drawer down there, so I can totally see how this happened. I didn't understand how air conditioners and refrigerators worked until I worked for Linux and had to learn the differences between air conditioners and heat pumps. It's such an elegant way of moving heat energy around. I work for a Linux dealer in my state, and TBH I had no idea there were such easy ways to clean or maintain units, and it blows my mind now how stupid I must have sounded asking what the difference was between the two. LOL. A very long time ago I was a Boy Scout. In my troop I was the only Star Scout. There was to be an election for summer camp to be in the Order of the Arrow. Whatever that was. You had to be a Star Scout and I was the only one. The night of the election 2 other kids were each awarded 7 to 9 merit badges they had conveniently just completed. Then they were promoted to Star Scout. The election was held, and I got nothing. One of the kids' father was an assistant scout master and the other kid was the son's friend. I got screwed, and that is when I learned how politics works. I quit the scouts 2 weeks later. How to use a corkscrew. I would screw it in, put the wine bottle between my knees and pull. When my brother used the leverage of the tool to open a bottle, my mind was blown. There are different kinds of corkscrews. Not all of them have that lever thingy. The classic type you just have to pull, which is entirely stupid. So of course you need to get yourselves a lever action one. Pulled the towel off my sister's head and she screamed in pain because her hair was in the towel. Always thought they kinda just wore it over their head. As someone who grew up with a brother, I just learned something new. My first grease fire was making French fries, and apparently they had too much moisture in them and the oil boiled over onto the burner very suddenly and caught flame. Good couple seconds of shock and WTF before moving the pan off the burner and covering it with another pan. Threw baking soda on the burner to put out the fire, but I could not reach the knob to turn off the burner with how high the flames were. Covered that in a pan also, and the lack of oxygen did the trick with the baking soda, but if I just stood there shocked a few more seconds it might have spread to the walls and ceiling. Never understood how people let kitchen fires get out of control until it happened to me. I had everything I needed and a fire extinguisher, but until you having it happen you don't know how quickly you will respond, and it happened so fast. This happened to me, except I was probably 10. My dad was in the shower and he ran out after he heard me start screaming. IDK how he put it out, but after he explained it to me it made sense. Oops. Pretty late to this thread, but I have a good one. I'm almost 2 decades old now and just now figured out you pull blind strings to one side to raise them and to the other side to lower them. I'd been fumbling around with them, pulling randomly and touching them as infrequently as possible like a buffoon for too long. I don't think I've ever heard someone refer to themselves as being 2 decades old. Lol, I might use this in future. My aircraft systems professor was a master of explaining things, even compared to other teachers. Valentine, he loved picking on random people. Myself, usually what are the 4 strokes of an engine? Well, there's intake, power, exhaust, wait, I'm missing one. Wrong, it's suck, squeeze, bang, blow, intake, compression, power, exhaust. Put this in a Kentucky accent behind an astonishing handlebar mustache, and that was my teacher. Another good one. Valentine, what's the difference between deviation and variation? One's the difference between true north and magnetic north. The other one is magnetic interference from electronics on board the aircraft. Which one is which? I forget. What's in the airplane? Your deviance. What's outside the airplane? It varies. Not really a that's how that works thing. More of a how did I not know that's what that meant? I only realized that 24/7 means all day every day, like 8 months ago. How the frick am I so stupid? Restaurants are called restaurants because it comes from an old French word for restorative, being that in early inns and rest houses, the keeper would serve meals that were restorative to the traveler's energy and health, and the term stuck when Boulanger opened the first proper restaurant. I never understood what that word meant or had to do with food, but now it makes so much sense. Nothing makes you feel human again after work and travel like a hot meal. There are tabs on the sides of rolls of aluminum foil and plastic wrap. If you push the 2 tabs in, this will stop the roll from popping out of the packaging when you pull on it. Genius. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.